Do what she did. She didn't like it. You had to do what she did. So one night, I think it was, we weren't there more than 2 nights or whatever. This Danish photographer got out and he was walking around all over. And Trudi heard him walking around and she yelled out at him, "What the hell are you doing out there?" He said, "I think a tree is going to fall down." "Oh," she said, "you stupid, you don't know from nothing. You don't know from nothing. No tree's going to fall down." But she couldn't stand it that he was out walking around and she wasn't. So she got out of her hammock. He said, "Yes." He said, "A tree's going to fall down." And he said, "And it's that one." And as he pointed to it, it came down. The tree came down. And it came over Jose's hammock. Jose was the guy who used to go in and help her. He worked there. He took care of the horses and whatever needed to be done. He lived in the back of the house. It came down over his hammock. It was heading for his hammock. And he didn't hear very well. And she began to yell at him, "Compadre, get out." And he couldn't get out on her. First of all, he couldn't hear, and he didn't hear in time, and he couldn't find the zipper. And by the time he got out, the tree had fallen down, but like this. And his hammock was under here. So it missed him, but it hit the lean-to, it hit where all the big cameras were kept, the important cameras. And it missed the camera, and it hit a crate where all the canned food was. So it really didn't do any damage, but it could have. So I said, "I'm not going back in there to sleep. I'm not going to go back into that hammock." And so Trudi says, "Oh," she said, "I suppose you want to sleep in Boer's tent, Boer's house." Boer's one of the Lacandons. I said, yeah, that's where I would like to sleep." So she took my hammock and she put it in his house. It was a big Lacandon, I don't know what you call it. It wasn't a tent. It was a great big house with a grass roof.
Like a palapa.
Yeah, and the roof came down almost to the ground. It just had a little space underneath. So my hammock, she put my hammock in there, and it was so interesting. And I could see Boer swinging back and forth in his hammock. I could see the smoke curling out of the tent, out of his house, the lean-to, whatever it was, going up through a hole in the roof. I could see the dogs and hear them parading around inside, padding around, and by early morning I could see the light from the river coming up through the bottom of his house. It was one of the most beautiful nights I've ever spent. And the next night, nobody would go back into the tent, into the hammocks. Not the photographer, not his wife, not me. Only Trudi did. So we sat around the fire. We thought we'd sit around the fire. So I said, let's take turns. We'll each take 2 hours. And you can all, sleep in my hammock. So the first one who went in there was a photographer's wife. She was scared to death to sleep in Boer's house. She didn't want it. So after about a half hour, she came out. So we sat around the fire all night. We never went back under the trees. And Trudi, in the beginning, was pacing back and forth, and she said I was a cowardly New Yorker. But anyhow, and the next, it was funny that. But the next night and then, see, Boer was Kayum's father, and he felt he was a Lacandon, and he felt that he was the prince of the Lacandones, and everybody owed him something because he was too damn lazy to work. So Jorge Keene caught a big fish, and Boer thought that Jorge should give him the fish, or at least half of it, and Jorge wouldn't give him any. And so they had a big fight, and Jorge Keene said he was going to kill Kayum. And Kayum, this is such a long story, and you don't know the people involved, and you don't know how Kayum at that time, I don't know what he was, 10 or something, and he wasn't quite right. I think something was wrong when he was born. One eye wasn't right, but I fell in love with him, and I loved him, and he loved me, and he loved the car. I had a car. I had a Studebaker. I had a 1953 Studebaker, the one that Raymond Loewy designed. And Caillou was crazy for that car, and I taught him how to drive with his one eye. But anyhow, so we left, and I said to Trudi, we can't leave them here because Jorge King said he was going to kill Caillou. So we all came out. We went, after that night we had to go down to the airport, and which was quite some distance away, and wait for the plane to come in. And we all got on the plane, including the dogs, who got plane sick and vomited all over the planes. And we came back to San Cristóbal, and they all stayed for a while, all the Lacandones. And eventually they went back. And that was my first trip to the jungle, and I took a couple of photos with that 35 millimeter camera, but I don't know whatever happened to them. I may have them someplace, I don't know. How did I get onto that?
I'm not sure. But did you love Trudi?
Did I like her?
Yeah.
I did, but I didn't take any of her crap like a lot of people did. And Janet always said that Trudi was afraid of me. And maybe in some way she was, because I always stood up to her, but everybody else was afraid of her. She was a character. I mean, there were lots of things I liked about her. And a lot of things that you just had to fight back. But we had some wonderful times with Trudi. And in the beginning, once a week we would go horseback riding with her. And she had her own horse and her own saddle, which was very well padded, and the stirrups were made to her length, they fitted. And she would hire, and Janet rode the mule. Trudi had a mule called Cubana, and that was very comfortable. And I had never been on a horse before, so they saddled up in the back of the house, in the back sitio. And those two got on the horses, Trudi on her big horse and Janet on the mule, and I was on that other horse that they rented for me. And they all ran out of the back sitio, and my horse just stood there with me sitting on it because I was scared to death that he knew it and he wasn't going to move. And as they ran past me, they shouted, "Kick him in the belly." I said, "What? I'm going to kick a horse in the belly? I can't do such a thing." So I sat there for a half hour or so until he finally decided to move, but I was scared to death all the time. And we came back stiff and sore because the saddles never fit right. And after a while I decided I don't need this. But Janet would go with Trudi every week, and I stopped going.
So Janet became a horsewoman.
In a way.
Mm-hmm.
And going out with Trudi was sometimes very wonderful, especially early in the morning. She had a great sense of beauty. She noticed everything. And there were lovely things about Trudi, in spite of all her yelling and